Hello. So, next session today is about anti-heroes. That's because I've gotten I've been inundated with a message about anti-heroes and how they work in literature, how they're used, and what things to avoid and what things to actually do with your anti-heroes. Now, anti-heroes are a very interesting thing. They're not essentially things that you should be too worried about getting right in most stories, because I tend to think most stories work reasonably well without an anti-hero. Anti-heroes should never be the crux of a story. They should always be something that you add in for flavour. They can even show you the type of world that your heroes are in if one of your heroes is an anti-hero and is celebrated as being as such. And obviously the quote there, "Make my day," from Dirty Harry and other Clint Eastwood movies. Clint Eastwood made an entire career, on being this kind of character. So, going to be a shorter video, not going to be a huge one. It's not going to be really long, should be about 10 minutes, just going over different forms of anti-hero, how you should use them, how you shouldn't use them. And again, even though I claim to know what I'm talking about, this is an opinion-based thing, you know, so if you think differently, then go ahead and tell me. But if not, then I hope it helps. Let's see where we go. So, what is an anti-hero first? We start off all of our talks with what is whatever we're talking about. And what is an anti-hero? Well, an anti-hero is someone who normally is the protagonist of a story, but he's a reluctant protagonist. I've always said that an anti-hero is somebody who actively doesn't know that he's the protagonist of a story. I'm going to use the pronoun he here, because I'm referring to things like Dirty Harry. You very rarely have female anti-heroes. It's very, very strange. If you know one, go ahead and put it in the comments, but I can't really think of one. Black Widow, maybe? But not really. She's a superhero. But yeah, an anti-hero is normally the protagonist of a story, but they're reluctant. You know, he's a reluctant... He doesn't really want to be the protagonist of a story, and he doesn't even identify as a protagonist of a story. You know, he's not really he doesn't think he's the crux around which the world spins, okay? I think they do normal heroes most of the time. But they always have a sense of destiny to them, whereas anti-heroes definitely shouldn't have a sense of destiny to them. In fact, they don't think that they should have destiny thrust upon them. But the world can do. The world can definitely make them a destined anti-hero, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, they often do not make heroic decisions, but instead make decisions based on their own prejudices, wants, and needs. Very important, this one. An anti-hero doesn't tend to do good things for the sake of being good. An anti-hero does good things by accident most of the time. The anti-heroes are so seductive because they're thrust into the limelight. They don't step into it. They're thrust into it. They make normal human decisions. They're selfish people. They make decisions that are good for them and no one else. And that's because they're anti-heroes. They don't care about anyone else. They just want things to go well for them. Redemption arcs with anti-heroes are a trope for a reason. They work, and that's because, you know, an anti-hero one of the main quests of the anti-hero is starting out as an anti-hero and becoming just a hero. You know, it's a very interesting arc to go through. They often do not perform heroic actions. Instead, they may kill prisoners in cold blood, and doing so actively fly in the face of many heroic norms. Henry V at the Battle of Agincourt is known as an English hero. He's a hero king of the English. But at the Battle of Agincourt, he had thousands of French prisoners, and instead of letting them be behind his lines as he was fighting the battle, he killed them all in cold blood. Now, you know why he's done that. He has thousands of French troops behind his lines right now who are not in shackles. You know, you don't have time to put them in shackles. They're surrounded by your own men, and they're kept prisoner. You can either get on with fighting the French army that's in front of you and have this, you know, sizable force behind you that are kept prisoner that could break out at any time, or you can nip the problem in the bud. If I was there, I would have made exactly the same decision, because I'm a human. I'm not a hero. I'm a human. I would not be able to find my way out of that situation, so I would have killed all of these French troops for the sake of keeping my own troops alive, because that's my job. And that's why anti-heroes are so interesting, because they're human. They have to make human decisions. The story doesn't bend and break to suit them like normal heroes. Normal heroes wouldn't have to make that decision. You know, some of them maybe, yes. Some heroes who aren't anti-heroes may have to make a tragic decision like that, but they would feel really conflicted about it, they'd feel terrible, and their whole arc would revolve around this one decision that they made. An anti-hero wouldn't give a shit. An anti-hero would go, yeah, I needed to do that. That needed to happen. So, go sue me. That had to happen. And Henry V, sorry, had no qualms about doing that. Absolutely no qualms whatsoever. And neither would I. And neither would most people, because, in a military standpoint, because they're normal human beings. They're not heroes. And in a fictional setting, that would be classed as an anti-hero, okay? They've made a decision that's very pragmatic and cold, but needed to be done, and they don't feel bad about it. And if they do, they can still go, well, I understand why it had to happen. It's just how it is. Number 4. This gives the anti-hero a massive amount of power. They're not shackled by morality, they can do anything. So this is another thing. And when I say not shackled by morality, I don't mean they're evil. What I mean by not shackled by morality is that they're not a white knight, they're not somebody who says, oh, I can't do that, because, No, an anti-hero can do whatever they want. If they think it's best for them, or best for the people that they're trying to look after, an anti-hero will do it. It doesn't matter. It could be killing an innocent person, could be killing a child, could be doing anything. As long as you can justify, if they're your protagonist, and if you're treating them as a hero, you should be able to, on some level, justify a questionable thing that the anti-hero has done. If you can't justify it, then they're a villain. And I know I like to say these things. I know people are very uncomfortable with me saying these things in absolutes, but it's for a good reason. It's because as a writer, if you don't have absolutes, you get confused and you start questioning your own decisions in writing a story. Have those absolutes. Be able to bend them and change them, sure, but have those absolutes. Don't be afraid of them, okay? What are the weaknesses of an anti-hero? Because there are some, okay? So, this constant non-conformist style can make the anti-hero ironically predictable. If you have an anti-hero who always acts against convention, if you have an anti-hero who always goes against the grain, that in itself is predictable. If you place him in a scenario where the obvious thing a hero would do is A, then it's obvious that your anti-hero is going to do B, and your reader will pick up on that very, very quickly. That can make an anti-hero very boring to the point where you start rolling your eyes whenever they're on the screen or on the page. Anti-heroes can be just as by the book as normal heroes because of that trait. You can have by the book anti-heroes who are reluctant heroes who you know exactly what they're going to do in any situation because they're anti-heroes. They become a trope in themselves. When an anti-hero was originally meant to fight against tropes, it was meant to be a reaction to a trope, but it ironically becomes a trope in itself, if not used properly. Following anti-heroes can be draining to the reader, especially if the setting itself is rather bleak. The author Mark Lawrence, who I've mentioned before, writes characters who are very like this. People have described his characters as anti-heroes. They are wrong. Mark Lawrence's characters are villains that he uses as protagonists, which is incredibly draining on the reader, because you're reading it and you hate this character, but you're told to root for him, and it just breaks, in my opinion, it breaks the entire story apart. If that's your thing, great. He's obviously selling books because he keeps writing them, but it's not for me. Okay, if it's for you and if that's a story you want to write, that's great. But I'm using it as a weakness because it is a weakness, unfortunately. More violent and evil anti-heroes, a la Mark Lawrence, can grate very quickly on a reader's patience. There are a few rules when writing, but making your reader actively dislike your main character is folly, and it's ridiculous. No matter what anyone tells you about your voice, no publisher will touch your work if your lead character is an absolute douche. So, Mark Lawrence is an exception to the rule. There is a very good reason why he's the only writer who does this to a degree. That's because publishers generally don't want you to do that with your main characters, okay? Your main character is supposed to be relatable. There's very little relatable in Adolf Hitler, for example, which is why there will never be a book based on Adolf Hitler as the main character, a protagonist in the story. It just won't happen because sane people, normal people, nice people, can't sympathize with him. They can't get behind him. He's not an anti-hero. An anti-hero is someone who does questionable things, but for the right reasons. Hitler would probably define himself as an anti-hero, to be honest with you, if you gave him this definition. Because he thought what he was doing was right and was for the betterment of the human race. It wasn't. It was completely diabolical and evil and whatever. But he would, he would define himself as an anti-hero. This is why you've got to be very, very, very careful about how your characters appear on the page. Because, again, all Mark Lawrence's main characters would also, consider themselves anti-heroes if you gave them the choice. Let's be honest. But they're not. They're villains because they do shitty things for shitty reasons. That's what being a villain is. An anti-hero is somebody who does occasional shitty things, but not for shitty reasons. They do them for good reasons. Yeah, they do them because they're the lesser of two evils. That sort of a thing. And there's a very good. There are few rules in publishing and in doing. I mean, I generally I'm one of those people who says you should be able to do whatever you want with your writing, and that's true. But on the flip side of that, there has to be at least one rule where you say, look, if I can't get into your story because your character keeps raping people on every single page, look, I've got nothing against rape being in forms of entertainment. I've got nothing against that as long as it furthers the story. But if they're doing it on every single page just because they're a douche, then your character is a douche and he is a villain. He is not an anti-hero. So always something to think about when moving forward. It's okay to have anti-heroes who go against the grain. It's not okay to have them be absolute dicks on every single page. The best anti-hero, alright? The best anti-heroes are rebels, but they remain approachable, okay? So the people who don't quite fit into the status quo, the people who don't quite fit into different things, to different societal norms, but they remain approachable, okay? Kratos would be one. If you've ever played God of War, especially God of War 4, the new one, with the Nordic stuff in it, Kratos is an anti-hero. He doesn't want to be a hero. He doesn't want to be the main character of any story. He just wants to take his wife's ashes up a mountain. That's it, But in doing so, he becomes a hero, So he's an anti-hero, and he makes questionable decisions. He wants to leave people behind all the time. He's rude. He's a douche, but he's well written. He's not a douche. He's rude, but he's well written rude. He's rude for a reason, because he's been through so much, and we know why he's rude. That's an anti-hero, right? If your character is just rude for the sake of being rude, he's just a douche, and no one wants to read that. Okay, stay away from edgelords. Okay, we've all been there around a role-playing table when people have been edgelordy. Your anti-hero should be a reluctant hero, not a mopey sap. They shouldn't be brooding in a corner just like, oh, I'm on my own, I'm a lone wolf, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, we've been over this, that's why it's a trope. That person is an anti-hero, yes, but they're not an interesting anti-hero. Anti-hero, he is still a hero. He just does not tend to act like one. Again, a la Kratos, right? He's still a hero. Other people define him as a hero. Other people say he's a hero, or they would think he has heroic tendencies. He's not, though. He's an anti-hero. But the key word there is hero. Yeah, he's still the main driving good force of your plot. It's just he has more depth to him. There's a lot more depth to him because he doesn't always make decisions that everyone says are good. Yeah. In other words, he's more human. Superman, for instance, is not an anti-hero, but neither is Batman in comics. Batman is not an anti-hero in the comics. He's not. He's a hero. Batman is a hero in the comics. In the Christopher Nolan trilogy, Batman is definitely an anti-hero because he doesn't want to be a hero. He doesn't set out to be a hero. He sets out to be a figure of fear. Batman in the comics does something similar, but he does embrace being a hero. He embraces being a super. I mean, he's in the Justice League, for God's sake. I mean, he's a hero. Whereas in the Christopher Nolan trilogy, he's a more human Batman, which is why he's so popular. The very reason why The Dark Knight works so well as a film is because you have two very human people as the protagonist in Batman, the anti-hero, and the antagonist, the Joker. The Joker could even be reasonably told to be an anti-hero in that movie. Yeah, because he's trying to do something for your own good. And the best villains you actually realise become anti-heroes. Sarah in the Mass Effect, as I told you last time, he's a villain, but I would actually phrase him as a tragic anti-hero, really. Because he's convinced, and you sort of get where he's coming from, but what he's doing is for the good of everyone. Even though it's horrific. In conclusion, told you it was short. Keep your anti-hero human and relatable. Stay away from brooding and monologues. Give him something to rebel against. Yeah, make him a rebel. Make sure make sure there's a reason for him to be an anti-hero. And give him a fatal flaw. Have him make selfish but understandable decisions. And if possible, redeem him. Alright? Bring him full circle. Bring him around into being a better person. That's all I've got to say on anti-heroes. So, thank you very much for watching. And I hope you found that helpful in any which way, shape or form. Again, shorter one. Wasn't really a long one. But it's just something that I felt that I needed to go over before we do our bigger videos next week on writing. Well, this week on writing. I thought that we're going to start off a nice simple one, anti-heroes. So how do you use them in your fiction? Have you ever used them before? Who's your favourite anti-hero from fiction? Let me know in the comments. Speak to you next time.